Hello, my name's Krista. Today I'm going to be talking to you about knitting, a brief shop update, and a special focus on my fingering weight bases. So come on in and join me as we get started. Hello, fiber friends. Welcome to Sweet Mountain Crafts Fibercast number 9. My name is Krista Lowe, and I am the owner and artisan dyer behind Sweet Mountain Crafts. Welcome back for any returning viewers, and welcome to any new viewers. I hope you find something that you enjoy here and something that you connect with, that you can participate as I share with you. Today is February 18th, and as it is now into the second month of the year, I am trying desperately to get some projects off the needles. I know lots of people participate in Finish It February, and I am hopeful that by the end of this month I will have lots of things off my needles. But you'll see today that I have a lot of things on the needles and lots of things to share with you. Let's start with, what am I wearing? So today I'm wearing the Irish Coffee Pullover by THEA COLEMAN. This is a sweater that I decided I wanted to cast on when I saw CORI EICHELBERGER of IROCKNITS talk about it on her podcast. She said that this was just a great all-around beginner sweater because it has some interest throughout the length of the sweater, and I'll be showing video here of myself wearing it. And so it breaks up the monotony of stockinette, that a lower part or the body of a sweater can be kind of boring to do, especially for newer sweater knitters, as well as this one just is a really flattering pattern on lots of different body types. So I decided I'd jump in and try this pattern myself. I actually really love this finished product. It is made with 2 yarns held double. I worked with the YARNBRARY's. This is her Fantasy Worsted Weight in the colorway Copperfield. I originally got this as a knit crate yarn, and then they had it available for purchase, additional skeins available for purchase at a discounted rate. So I went ahead and bought more, a sweater's quantity's worth plus, because you can see I still have a full skein here. So I bought enough to be able to knit the sweater for myself. And then at the same time, I had also purchased this really pretty golden rust orange color. All those colors come through on this yarn from Yarn at Home Mom. And I apologize, I lost the ball band for this, so I don't remember what she called the color on this, but I don't believe Yarn at Home Mom is dyeing anymore. So at this point in time, I don't believe that this would be available anyway. But it was just a beautiful mohair silk lace weight yarn that I decided to hold double with this. I actually wore this sweater recently for a speaking opportunity that I had at our local middle school. There was an enrichment class that is teaching the kids how to crochet. So I was invited to come into the class and present on yarn and fiber, and I had a lot of fun just talking to the kids about what yarn is made of. I talked to them about what I do as a yarn dyer, and just got to expand a little bit of their knowledge on what it is that they're doing with their crochet. I chose to wear this sweater for that class specifically because in this yarn, with these 2 yarns held together, there are 4 different animals represented. So this is a superwash merino with baby alpaca and mulberry silk. So right there we have the merino, the sheep, the alpaca, and then the silk, which would be, of course, from the moths. And then this is a mohair and silk blend. So that would be goat, again, with the silk. So it was just a fun way to have a sweater, a completed project, and demonstrate to the kids that it is from all different animals that we can get yarn and all different places that we can find fiber. So it's is a super soft sweater. Actually, the pattern calls for this kind of this keyhole that I have at the top here is supposed to just be left open, but because of the slickness of the alpaca and the silk in this sweater, the weight of it kind of pulls and it has a tendency to pull down on me. So while I love the sweater, it's super warm and I do wear it in the fall, especially because of the orange color. I ended up having to put kind of a lifeline in at the top. Here, let's see. I don't think I can pull it apart, but anyway, I just stitched a thread of the yarn through the top in order to help give it a little bit more structure so that that wouldn't have a tendency to grow and pull apart and then slowly start slinking down as the sweater gets heavy through the course of the day. But I don't mind that I had to do that. It kind of closed up the neck area a little bit for me, the neck opening, and it helps to keep the sweater in place. And like I say, it's a super comfortable sweater. It's very warm with the mohair especially on there, and yet it has just a really rich feel to it. So this is a fun sweater to knit. I finished this, let's see, I finished the second sleeve of it just last year. So I had started it quite a while ago, but just finished it last year and had the opportunity to wear it last fall. Really quick, just a little bit of a life update. I have been on the road a lot in the last couple weeks. So unfortunately, this podcast is coming out a week later than I would have liked, but that's okay. That's just how life goes at times. And I will show here just this map. So I was in Bozeman, Montana to visit my oldest son. He had his 20th birthday. So we were up visiting him and then came back home. And then the following weekend, we left and went down to Phoenix, Arizona to see our 18-year-old son who's just getting established down there. And we were driving some of his things too. So between driving to Bozeman and then driving to Phoenix, I've been on the road a lot, but got to see lots of beautiful places. I'd never been to Phoenix before, and it is gorgeous down there. So that was a lot of fun to get to see that. And of course, it was great to get to see my boys. So now I'm back home. My daughter and my husband have also had birthdays recently. So we've been in the midst of birthday celebrations, and actually tomorrow evening, my daughter's having some friends over to help celebrate her 15th birthday. And so we're looking forward to having some time for her to hang out with friends and do some fun things with them. That's been a bit of life because family life has been such a high priority over the last couple weeks. It has pulled me a bit away from my business and away from, of course, this podcast and away from knitting. I've just been really, really busy with just keeping up with family over the last few weeks, which is perfectly fine. My business is such that I can set it aside to some extent and take care of family needs when needed. So it has been good to be able to do that. But I'm back and I'm ready to get going again on some dyeing. I've got some big dye plans for this next week. And I do have some things that I've accomplished, so as I stated, I will be showing some things for a shop update here soon. Keeping me accountable. I've had lots of fun getting some knitting done while in the car if I wasn't busy packing or making food for my kids, because I made sure to have food on hand for the kids that were home while we were gone, and I made sure to have some food to take to the two boys that we were visiting. So I had lots of preparations and lots of things that I was working on. But when I was sitting in the car traveling, I had the opportunity to knit. Thankfully, my third oldest son just recently received his driver's license. So on the return trip from Bozeman, I was able to knit while he drove. And then on the trip down to Phoenix, my husband did the majority of the driving. So that gave me an opportunity to get some knitting done then too. So I have made some progress. I'm not quite as far as I'd like to be just yet, but I will get there on my Comfort Fade Cardi. Here is the cardigan. On the last podcast, I had just started onto the sleeves and I have made it down. I'm down to almost where I'm going to be adding in the cuff. So I'm very, very close. You can see next to the body of the sweater here, I'm so close to putting the cuff on with that. I knit my sleeves 2 at a time. The only difference I've made in this pattern as I've gone is that I went down a needle size in order to get gauge, but otherwise I am following the pattern as written. I guess there is one other difference. I'm knitting the sleeves inside out. I'm faster at knitting stockinette rather than reverse stockinette. So I'm knitting it where the knit side is to the outside of the sleeve, and then when I get them done, I'll flip them right side out for the pattern, which is the reverse stockinette side will be the side that will be the exterior of the cardigan. I'm really excited about this sweater. I know I've been mentioning it on most of the podcasts so far, so it will be a fun day when I get this finally cast off and ready to wear. The yarns that I'm using for this are Sweet Mountain yarn in the Daily Blessings line. Again, something that I'm hoping to have in my dye pots soon so that I can list some of these colors for sale in my shop. Next, I have a project that I'll show it briefly, but I've put it on hold. This is my brioche adventure shawl, and I think I put 2 rows of progress on this, but you can see it has the cable with the blockers at the end instead of needles, because I had to actually borrow from this for another project that I'm working on. But I have every intention of continuing with the shawl. This shawl did not travel with me. I decided to leave this one at home while I was on the road. Because it has so many different colors that I'm working through, I decided it might be a little bit more to take that with me. So I decided to leave this one home. So it's been somewhat set aside, but it won't be put in permanent timeout. It's just taking a brief pause while I work on another project. So the next project that I have is actually a test knit. This is a test knit for PINKAVA. She designed a Canadian beanie, and she wanted some test knitters. So I am working on this. I have lots of family in Canada, so Canada is a special place to me, and with all the political unrest that's going on up there, it's really difficult to see what they're having to go through, and so many things that are reflective of what's happened here in the States, but to a whole nother level. I can't even imagine some of the difficulties that they're dealing with, and definitely my heart goes out to all of Canada and the struggles that are taking place right now. So when Anne posted a link, or a request, I should say, for test knitters for her Canadian beanie, I definitely was interested in knitting some, just to trial her pattern. I've test knit for Anne before, but then also for the opportunity to have the hats, the resulting hats. I decided for this, just because I wanted true red and white and I didn't have any in stash, I just went and purchased cheap Red Heart Super Saver yarn in a worsted weight in order to trial this pattern. I am finding that my gauge with this yarn, they claim that it's a worsted weight, but it is a heavy worsted weight. And so I'm finding that it's a little bit too big. So my hat is supposed to measure around 22 inches, and I can already tell that it's definitely larger than that. But I don't think it'll be a problem. It'll still give me a chance to test the pattern. I'll finish the pattern, and then I'll probably do it again with another yarn at some point in order to make sure that I can knit the hat with the appropriate gauge. As you can see, I've just barely started. There's just a few rows kind of striping at the bottom, and then the rest is going to have the Canadian flag. So I am looking forward to getting through this. This is actually the reason that my brioche adventure shawl is on hold, is because I needed the cable in order to be able to work this hat. What I do when I knit a hat on a cable like this, because the hat this one is quite big, so I probably could just leave it fully on the cable, but in order to give myself some room to work, I end up doing a bit of a loop, a magic loop for this as well. And as I'm knitting, that loop just stays at my beginning of round. So when I work around the hat, then that excess is switched to the next side. And that's how I work my hats. So I like working with magic loop almost any time over double pointed needles, or even using just straight needles. I find myself using circular needles predominantly. I find that it makes for easy travel. You have fewer needles to deal with. You have less likelihood of your work falling off your needles. So most of my work is going to be on circular needles. And for my circulars, I predominantly use ChiaoGoo red lace, interchangeable set. I have one interchangeable set at this point. I can see already that I think there's going to come a day where I'll probably get another. I use a 5-inch needle tip or needle point, and sometimes this 5-inch length is just a little long. They have a 4-inch option, or they also have minis, and I could see myself at some point going to one of those sets as well, just to have another set on hand, as well as to have the versatility of a different length needle. Although I do find I purchased the 5-inch length specifically so that as I'm holding it, I didn't want this portion to rub on the back or the heel of my hand. So I decided to purchase the little bit longer needle, thinking that that would be a way to avoid that. And I find they are quite comfortable to use. It's just that there are times that as you're going around a smaller circumference, the 5-inch length is just a bit too much. Next up, I have a couple projects that are in the works that I am getting ready to start as soon as I get a couple of these things off the needles. So the Canada hat and the Comfort Fade CARDI will be done fairly soon. And on the side, I always usually keep a sock project going. So the hat is kind of like taking the place of my sock project right now, just because it's a short, quick accessory that as soon as I get that off the needles, then I'll have more space to be able to add in a sock project. And I actually have a sock project I just finished, so I'll show that here shortly. But my next sock project that I have coming up is my two sisters and some yarn. And I'm going to be knitting this using the Gingy Knits pattern, twins, or sisters, not twins. And I'm looking forward to knitting that sock set, as well as the wrist warmers from this sock yarn. I'm really looking forward to the finished product, actually, of those. And I think Corinne of Gingy Knits did a great job designing the pattern. So that will be coming up for my sock project very soon. And then another project that I have is from this book, Coffeehouse Knits. This was a gift to me from Coggy of High Fiber Diet. And I love this sweater. So this is the Frothy Pullover, and it is designed by Catrina Frost. And I love the finished look of this sweater, and I figured my daughter would enjoy this sweater as well, and I've been wanting to knit her something for a little while. So I actually pulled this out, and I so badly want to cast it on, but I'm trying to be diligent to finish off some of my other projects before I cast this on. But this is going to be held in my slopestyle bag that I have, a canvas bag made by some friends and their local business. And the colors that I'm going to use, or the color I should say, it's a single color, but I have multiple skeins of it, is Sweet Mountain Yarn in the Lush Woodbine colorway. This is on my slope sock. So this is a 2-ply, 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. And I think it's going to make a beautiful sweater. I love how this color dyed up, and I'm so excited to see it knit up. So I really kind of wanted to do this for my daughter's birthday, which was actually at the beginning of February. But I knew that once we got sick before the holidays and then the holidays hit, there was no way I was going to be able to squeeze this in after all that and before her birthday. So I actually asked her opinion on this sweater. Sometimes I like to do things as a surprise, especially if it's a gift knit. But this time I did ask her opinion, and she seems excited about this sweater. So I'm excited about it. She's excited about it. This is going to be going on the needles very soon. One more thing that I've been working on that you guys are helping keeping me accountable on is my stash down. Now, I showed this on the last podcast that this is my stash down record keeping. You can see it says here, progress over perfection, because indeed, that is my plan, not to be perfect at this, but to hopefully make some progress on my stash. But this is the incoming stash. This is the used stash. And right now, this looks very heavily sided one direction. So this is all the yarn that has come into my stash since the beginning of the year. A lot of it I showed on the last podcast. 400 grams. Each one of these signifies 100 grams of yarn added to the stash or taken out of the stash. The most recent addition to this is the 400 grams of Super Saver, which is kind of hard for me to call regular stash just because it's acrylic yarn. This is not my hoarded stash, I guess, but it is still yarn that made it into my stash this month. So I made sure to add that into my count. And I will be probably working with that pretty quickly just to keep moving it along. But you can also see I did get 100 grams out of stash, and I will show that in just a minute. So the idea here is that I'm not considering it out of stash until I have a finished project with it. So as you've noted, probably, my cardigan and my adventure shawl and projects that I'm working on are using some of this stash, but I don't count it as complete or out of stash until the project's finished. So if I really do get to meet some of my desired goals with Finish It February, I will be able to hopefully take some of these off of here and add them down here to make this a little bit more of a balanced look. We'll see how that goes. With that, what I did finish, or woohoo, I made it, is this pair of socks. So I need to properly block these socks and weave in ends yet, but this is a pair of socks. This is just HERMIONE'S everyday sock. It's a free pattern available online. And it's a very, very simple pattern repeat that just adds a little bit of texture to a sock. But this is a sock that my husband's aunt requested some socks from me. So, and she specifically requested a color similar to this. She said that she wanted kind of a green teal color. So this is my attempt at having dyed a yarn specifically for her at her request, and then knitting a pair of socks. Now this is on a new to me sock base. This is a sock base that I've only offered in my shop once so far. I wanted to knit it up and see what I thought of it myself. So this is my plateau sock. This is an 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% nylon fingering weight yarn. I'm super excited about how it worked. The yarn is a little bit more splitty than I normally would prefer, but I think that the finished product is really nice. It's just got a super soft hand to it. I really like it. Just adds a little element of luxury to some of my other yarn bases are like. So with that, let me talk a little bit about my yarn. I decided, since I haven't finished a whole bunch of projects recently or don't have a whole lot of new projects to share, I figured I could take a little bit of time today and talk about some of the yarn bases that you can find in my shop. I thought today would be a great opportunity to talk about my fingering weight bases, because those are the bases that I sell the most of, as well as the base that I probably work with the most. I find that it is a very versatile base to work with. Fingering weight is a sock weight base, but that does not mean that it is limited to socks. Fingering weight can be used for shawls, hats, scarves, sweaters, all kinds of projects. I find that it is probably one of the most versatile bases for a knitter. It is a little bit light for a crocheter, but that's not to say that it can't be used. I've crocheted beautiful shawls with fingering weight in the past. Most of the fingering weight bases in my shop are labeled sock. The reason for that is not because they're just limited to being used for socks, but because they lots of times have a nylon content to them as well. That nylon helps to give elasticity and longevity, especially to socks that are going to be used on the feet and worn possibly aggressively with shoes and on hard surfaces or whatever it may be. So a lot of my sock weight bases are with a nylon content. Now I am going to get ready to show you one that I do call sock, but it does not have nylon. So this is my Wyoming sock, or Y sock. I just abbreviate it, WY sock. And this is a 2-ply fingering weight yarn. It is 100% Cormo. It is all processed here in Wyoming at a mill here in Wyoming, and then I dye it. And this is a beautiful base. I really like this for a natural base. I think this is a beautifully produced yarn, and actually with The Girl Who Wears Wool Socks and Windblown Fibers in Casper, I've done a collaboration with them over the past year, producing sock yarns in colors that Hannah of The Girl Who Wears Wool Socks has chosen and decided that she wanted those colorways, and then she would get the colors to me, I dye the yarn, and then she is producing socks or yarn. You can buy the yarn unfinished and use the yarn from her, or you can buy a finished sock set from her as well. She has a sock knitting machine to do that on. So Hannah and I have been working very closely with these, and this yarn has produced beautiful socks. Now Hannah says that she wears her socks all the time and that they've held up well. I think that if you are careful with these socks, they do have longevity. You just have to be extra aware of the fact that this sock base does not have nylon in it. So and because it's not a superwash wool, it needs a little bit more attention to care. But it's a beautiful sock base. It is a lovely soft texture. It's nice and plump because that Cormo, just even though it's only a fingering weight base, as you work with it, it fills out. It's just a lovely yarn to work with. So again, that's my Wyoming sock. My next sock base is my slope sock base. This is another 2-ply fingering weight base. It's an 80% merino, superwash merino, 20% nylon, and it is a product of the US. I don't know exactly which farms the sheep for this have been raised on, but this is all milled here in the States and produced. And then I love working with this 2-ply because while it only has 370 yards and 100 grams, it again is just a really nice plump yarn. So between these two, whether you go with the non-superwash or the superwash, this one with a little bit of nylon, this one without, these two yarns act very, very similar to each other. So I enjoy working with either one of them, whether it's the Wyoming sock or the slope sock. Again, because these are 2-ply, even though I've designated these as sock yarns, I find that I use 2-ply yarn, fingering weight yarn, predominantly for sweaters. And I think the main reason for that is because I find that a sweater is going to take a little less of a beating typically than socks. And I just really like the finished product of a sweater knit with the 2-ply yarn. So as I said, this is what I'm intending to use for my daughter's sweater, is this 2-ply slope sock yarn. Next up, my next fingering. This base gets so much attention in my shop. This is my SCREE sock. And let me just really quick mention SCREE. Not everyone knows that word. That is a word, all of my names tend to have a mountain theme or the suggestion of the mountains in the name. So all my bases. So slope sock, that's a fairly easily understood, slope being part of a mountain slope. But SCREE, a SCREE field is a field of rocks on the side of a mountain where it's just a huge slide of rocks, smaller rocks lots of times. And SCREE, to me, this is a 4-ply yarn, and because of all the plies in it, it immediately made me think of a SCREE field that you would see on a mountainside. So that's how it got its name. And I find that this is a workhorse of a yarn. It is incredibly durable as a sock yarn because it has 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, but it's also 4-ply. And that 4-ply creates just a really nice round yarn that has a lot of durability, that the additional plies in it just gives it a strength and a durability that you're not going to find the same in the 2-ply. Not to say that this 2-ply is not going to handle being made into socks or otherwise, it's just more likely to pill it's going to be more likely to possibly start falling apart because those 2-plies just don't wrap around each other the same that the 4-ply does. So SCREE sock is, like I say, it's a workhorse in my yarn shop. I sell predominantly this yarn. I would say that this outshines so many of the other yarns in my shop because it is such a great yarn, and yet it's still fingering weight, but because it's 389 yards in 100 grams, I find that it is, again, just a little bit on the plumper side of a fingering weight, which gives it the ability to be knit in pretty much any fingering weight pattern. You can use this comfortably, but it's going to be a thicker, fuller finish at the end. And I really love working with this. This one happens to be my Vinca color on SCREE. I don't have this listed in the shop, but possibly tomorrow. You can see this color is, this yarn base is the base that I use predominantly for my sock sets. So I will occasionally offer up other bases, but this is one you'll see the most. And finally, I don't have a skein of it to share right now, but I do have this sock again. The Plateau sock is my newest addition in my fingering weights, and it is the 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon base, and it just takes and elevates the other sock yarns that I have. It takes it up to a luxury level. So these 3 are just great, solid, fabulous yarns to work with for so many different projects. But Plateau just takes it up and adds that little element of luxury with the cashmere included. So each of these sock bases are available in my shop in various forms. You can look for them under the fingering, or if you ever want, in my shop there is a search method, and if there's one of these sock bases in particular, or these fingering weight bases in particular that you'd like to look up, feel free to search that way. I have one more fingering weight base that I don't call a sock yarn. I really don't see it as a sock yarn. This is my SPIRE single ply. So it is a fingering weight base, but it is a single ply yarn. And if you can tell here, there's a little bit of halo on this, even just while it's in the skein. A single ply yarn doesn't have the longevity. Again, the fewer plies that you find in a yarn, the more likelihood it will take a beating as it's being used or worn. So I dyed up, and I do still have some of the SPIRE fingering weight in my shop. This is a great yarn for shawl knitting, for, again, probably sweaters. I've not done a sweater out of this myself, but I imagine it would do okay as a sweater. I would not choose this yarn, however, probably for a sock. This is a 100% superwash merino. It has no nylon content, but also just being that it's the single ply, it needs to be handled a little more gently with a little more love and care. So this is it's a nice yarn. It's still beautifully soft hand. It's wonderful to dye. I love dyeing this just because it takes the colors so incredibly well. But it is one that you have to be a little bit more specific with which kind of projects you're going to use this yarn on. So those are each of my fingering weight bases that you can find in the shop at this point in time. 2 of them, three of them, are all American made products, which makes me happy. I love being able to source in the US when I can, just for reduced shipping costs as well as availability, and just supporting our own fiber industry here in the States. So the other 2 that are outside the US are from Peru, and they're both beautiful yarns as well. So yes, make sure to check out those fingering weights in the shop. This weekend, I intend to do a small shop update, and this is going to be a very, very small update, but I am so excited that I now have the opportunity to offer a new weight of sock yarn. Now it might be a little confusing because, as I just said, fingering weight or sock weight is considered one and the same. When you talk about a fingering weight yarn or a sock weight yarn, you tend to be talking about the same thing. But something that has been very popular lately is the DK weight socks. So I call this my DK sock base, and that might be a little confusing, but the idea here is that I am expressly bringing this weight or this yarn to the shop for a sock base. This is a 20% 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and it is a DK weight base that is now going to be available in the shop for a number of my sock yarns. So I had originally been offering a DK weight with a 100% superwash merino. I like that yarn a lot. I use it and have enjoyed working with that yarn, and I'll continue to carry that. That is my Mount DK. That will be a yarn that will continue to be available in my shop, but I decided that I didn't want to use that as my sock weight base, or as my DK sock base. And the reason for that is because it doesn't have any nylon content. I want to make sure that I'm providing my customers a sock yarn that will hold up to being worn as socks. So I have this new base that I am now working with that is, as I said, a nylon and merino content. So the nylon in this gives it just that little bit of elasticity, and then allows my knitters that are working on specifically sock projects to have a little more confidence that hopefully those socks will hold up to wear. So here you can see I have on my DK sock base, I have Rose Opal Knits and Two Sisters and some yarn. I decided to go ahead and start with these two podcast inspired sets because I know that I've had some requests specifically from Denise of Two Sisters and Some Yarn to do a DK weight. And then I also just wanted to see, as I work with these yarns, I wanted to see what it would be to have this sock set available for not only knitters, but also crocheters. I find that in the crochet world, crocheters tend to prefer a little bit heavier weight to work with. And I think that this sock set would be a beautiful set to work up hats or mittens or socks in a crocheted pattern. So I decided to go ahead and bring these to the shop. These will be in my shop update tomorrow, hopefully. That is Saturday the 19th. And I look forward to sharing these with you all. I have set aside some of this yarn myself to be able to do some projects myself with the DK weight, but any DK sock pattern would work well with these sets. So yes, as I said, this is my DK sock set. It is my newest base in the shop, and I'm excited to bring it to you all. Till next time. This has been a short podcast today. I realize that I don't have as much content, but that's okay. This is where I'm at for this week, and that's perfectly fine. I will catch up with you more next week, or next podcast, hopefully in a couple weeks. But I did have a couple things I wanted to share. First of all, I had the opportunity to pick up this great little book called Textiles. It is actually like a textbook from the Principal Lowell Industrial School of Lowell, Massachusetts. So this is a beautiful little book that was originally written, copyright is 1910, and this edition is a copyright of 1912. And I love looking at these old books. I have a bunch of old books like this on a bookcase in our living room. This one in particular just kind of hits home because the chapters, as I look through them, are fibers, wool sorting, wool substitute and waste products, worsted yarn, woolen yarn, weaving, dyeing and finishing, woolen and worsted fabrics, cotton, knitting, lace, flax, hemp, silk. It just goes through all kinds of fiber content. And I am so excited. I actually hope to read this cover to cover because it is fun. Even though from 1912 to 2022, our production has changed, the content of the fibers has not. So it is really interesting to me that so much of what they did in their preparation of these fibers is so similar to what we do now, or rather what we do now is similar to what they did then. And I am already enthralled with this book. I've read through portions of it, just little snippets of it, but I intend to read the entire thing and just see what I can learn. Already I've been interested to find that some of their artificial, I guess, fibers are things that we don't even have anymore. And then another thing that you don't see in here is acrylic or polyester or nylon or any of the petroleum-based fibers that we see now. So it was at a time before any of that existed. So of course our textile world has changed dramatically with those changes, but it's just a fun little treat. So that was a fun find at a used book sale that I came across. Another thing I've been working on, I know I've mentioned Outlander to you. I was listening to Outlander on a library loan app and my time expired. I didn't get through the book and then I put it back on hold. Well, now I'm on a wait list for like 3 months. It's so popular. So it's kind of funny that I'm on such a long wait list because when I originally borrowed the book, I got it like within a couple days. But now I'm on this super long wait list. So Outlander is on hold for now. I'll get back to it. In the meantime, I decided to start listening to The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. I am not necessarily a Ken Follett fan. I know he's a prolific writer. I haven't read enough of his stuff to say that I know even a lot of what he writes, but I came across this book and it is, even according to the author himself, kind of a unique piece that he did. So I believe there might even be sequels to this, but I'm not positive. But I've started listening to The Pillars of the Earth on my audiobook app, and I'm enjoying listening to that and hope to continue that and finish that in the next few days. And I will pick up Outlander again in the future. I'm still reading at night the Brothers Karamazov and getting steadily through that read, and we'll continue with that. And otherwise, normally at this time, I share some podcasts that I've been watching, but as of right now, I have not had a lot of time to sit and listen to podcasts, so I'm not going to share any more of those this week, but I'll be sure to have more for you in a future episode. So I think that's all for now. I hope all is well for you and that you guys are having a fabulous February. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye. No, let's not start there again. My teeth are sparkly.